What's good, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be showing you a very powerful technique for building apps with FlutterFlow, especially if you are looking to customize them, to make them a little bit interesting, put a little bit extra in there. And this is going to apply to pretty much everyone, regardless what kind of app you're going to be building, regardless what kind of niche you're in, because I'm sure that if you're looking to build certain type of app with FlutterFlow, and this includes a wide range of different categories, different uses, you're going to be having some issues. And the technique I'm going to be showing you today is going to help you to overcome those issues. Now, as is the case with all the apps that I build, they're going to be available on my Patreon page. So you can go on that page, view and clone pretty much all the FlutterFlow apps that I've built on this channel. Now, before I show you the technique and the kind of problems it aims to solve, I want to show you an app that I use all the time. And this is a typical Pomodoro app. This is a productivity app. And so you can, you have a calendar, you can start a new task, you can go over here and you can set a time. So let's say you want to have a task for 40 minutes, okay? You can just select 40, press play, and it has a countdown. Now, what I really like about this particular screen is this slider. Okay, the slider is really nice. It's a nice touch. They could have used a regular slider like you typically see in FlutterFlow and other apps, but they have this kind of wheel that works very elegantly. And I must admit, this nice touch that kind of attracted me to this app. It's kind of, it feels kind of cool to kind of slide it. And you can even see it gets kind of distant. It has this effect where the edges, they seem far away. So it gives us this kind of curvature, which I really like. Now, let's say you want to go out and you want to build a screen such as this one in FlutterFlow. Typically, you should be able to go out and build just any kind of app using FlutterFlow. FlutterFlow is made for that. And so if I go inside FlutterFlow, I have a brand new app here and I have a brand new page. And I can create a column. Let's say I create a container here. I have a container and I'm going to make it a little bit wider because we're going to be placing elements there. And let's say I want to center this container, something like this. Now this container is nicely centered. And let's say I'm going to have a column inside this container to hold all the elements there. And so let's create like a height, maybe a, I don't know, 750. Let's do something like this. Okay, so something like this, maybe 700. And so we have a container and then we have a column. And let's say I want to list those elements. And so I actually have a screenshot of this app to help me build it right here. And so we have the time, we have the slider, and then we have a button. Then we have some other touches which are kind of minor. And so the way you would typically build it is you would have several rows. So you're going to have a row for this, a row for this, a row for this, and a row for that. So let's go and do that real quick. I'm going to create a row. And inside this row, I'm going to have a timer. Okay, so I'm going to just type timer. Now I have a timer. I'm going to center this row. I'm going to center it. I'm going to make the timer a little bit bigger. Let's say we want to make it 50. Okay, that looks really nice. And let's say we want to center the column. Okay, that looks pretty cool. Maybe something like this. Okay, perfect. And that's going to kind of center it inside on this canvas here. And let's say we're going to duplicate this row. We want to duplicate that. And let's make them align together. Okay, perfect. And then we can add some padding. And so this is our timer. The second thing, what do we have? Well, we're going to have the slider. But before we do the slider, let's do the button. So the button is actually very easy. I'm just going to delete this timer right here. And I'm going to search for a button. We're going to do an icon button. And I'm going to come in here. I'm going to add an icon. I'm going to search for play. And we want like a play type button. And maybe a fill color we want kind of pinkish. Since the screen is kind of this pinkish light reddish, we're going to make the icon size a little bit bigger. We're going to make the button a little bit bigger. Let's do an icon size. Okay, perfect. And let's make it the radius. Okay, now it's circle. And so now we kind of have the beginning of the app. We can make the container have a fill color kind of pinkish, something like this. Okay, now it's kind of starting to look like maybe we make this text color a little bit darker. How about this? Okay, or maybe even darker. maybe even reddish, something like this. And so maybe for the button, have something a little bit darker. Okay, so something like that. I don't know, maybe a little bit lighter. You guys get the picture here, okay? Now we need that slider, okay? FlutterFlow does not have a slider that works just like that. What FlutterFlow has is it just has a regular slider, but we don't want to have a regular slider. We want something unique, okay? So the way you would do it is that you would use a custom widget, okay? So where do you get this kind of slider? Well, you can go to a site called fluttergems.dev. You can grab a slider, and if you scroll down, you're going to find a slider that kind of does what you want, okay? And so this slider is actually a vertical, but it's actually very easy to make it horizontal, okay? And so all you need to do is come in here, you can load up this package, and this works exactly how you want it to work, right? You are sliding this up and down, and you have the value being displayed, and all of this is customizable. And so let me show you how to implement this slider inside our app, and then I'm gonna show you the problem that we're gonna have when trying to kind of build the app in this fashion. And so the way you integrate the slider is you typically are gonna go into example, you're gonna find an app here, so we have an app, and what you wanna do is you wanna go to the build, right? You have this build thing here, and you wanna grab this column, you wanna grab this container right here, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna find this, I'm gonna get everything, and then I'm gonna fix it up. So we're gonna get, what do we have? We have the scaffold. Yeah, I'm going to get that, and I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to go back here to my app here, and I'm going to go to custom widgets, and I'm going to add a slider, and I'm going to say new slider, okay? And you want to click on view boilerplate. You want to copy to editor. You want to always start with this because it's going to give you kind of what you want. And where you see this return container, you want to replace that with the new container, okay? And so we're going to say, we're going to paste all this here. We're going to say return scaffold. And typically, we only need the container. We don't need this top app bar or anything like that. So we're just going to return this container right here. We're going to fix it up. You also want to make sure we add these things here as well. I'm just going to copy this directly here. Copy that here, paste it right here. Now, you also want to include this thing here, this long line. You want to copy that, go back to our widget, and you want to paste it up on top. This is important. And you also want a dependency, okay? This is standard procedure, very, very simple for including new custom widgets. So you want to go all the way to the top, click on this right here, go back here, and add a dependency, okay? All right, so now we have this here, and we're also going to be displaying the value because the way this widget works is that it immediately displays the value that you're scrolling through, okay? So this is our vertical weight slider, and actually by default it's vertical, but you can specify a parameter that is going to make this thing horizontal, and that parameter is vertical, and you just simply say false. And now this thing is going to be horizontal. And you shouldn't worry too much about the errors you're getting because we are including a dependency, and so do not worry about this too much. So now let's try to compile and preview it, and hopefully it's going to work. All right, so it compiled successfully. You want to increase the width and height because we're not showing the whole thing. So let's do a width of, let's say, 400, and we need the height, let's say 500, and now we are seeing the slider. Now check this out. If I drag it up, it increases. If I drag it down, it decreases. It's a beautiful slider. We can hit save, and then we can go back to our app, come back here, go to the row, and add this new slider here. Okay, same thing. We need to increase the width. Let's do 300. Let's do a height of 500. All right, so now we can run the app. Let's go ahead, run the app, and let's test out everything together. All right, so here's our app. And first, let's go over the components so that we understand kind of what's going on. First is our timer component, okay? This is a FlutterFlow standard component that we're using. And the idea here is that you feed a time in milliseconds, and it's gonna have a countdown, or you could use it as a stopwatch. Next, we have this text field, and we have our custom slider. This and this are part of a single custom widget. This is a FlutterFlow standard widget, okay? This is part of a single widget. And then we have the button, and this is a standard FlutterFlow button, okay? So it's important to make that distinction early on. Very, very important that this is a standard FlutterFlow component. This is a standard, but this is custom. Now, if I drag up on this, it increases the value. It drags the slider, increases the value. It's in kilograms, but we can change it to anything that we want. And so I'm dragging it up. It's increasing the value. If I drag it down, it decreases the value. And this is an excellent slider. It fits our use case. This is exactly what I was looking for when I wanted to build that screen. And it does exactly what we want. It's a great, great slider. It also has these helpful tick marks. So it has the big tick marks, it has the smaller ones, and it has these medium ones, right? And what's nice about it is that as you drag up and down, it falls on one of the tick marks. So this big tick mark is actually like an entire, an entire integer. So it's like an entire one. And then these medium ones are like halves. So this is 0.5, this again is 0.5, where this is a full number. And then we have these small ones that are like a tenth. Okay, so this is a fantastic slider. It's fully customizable. I'm going to show you that later. You can change anything that you want. But there's a problem. There's a problem. I don't know if you can see it yet. We are working with this custom widget, but this custom widget has no way of interacting with our app. And so as I'm dragging it down or I'm dragging it up, you see this is changing because it's the same custom widget. It has the same state, but this is not changing at all. So if I'm dragging it down, this is not connected. And that is because the way custom widgets work inside FlutterFlow is that they're kind of like self-contained apps. They can display anything that you want. You can have text, you can have, a custom widget that has, tick marks and all kinds of interesting things. They can react to your input like we have it here. But it's very hard for this custom widget to communicate to your app as a whole. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. Here's a diagram of your FlutterFlow app. Okay, and so this is your FlutterFlow app. You might have different FlutterFlow widgets inside of this app, and you can have, data inside these widgets inside of this app, and they're all going to communicate perfectly with one another. But anytime you want to build a custom widget, which is going to be the case with all of us, anytime you want to build an amazing app, like, with a cool design, with a cool UI, with a custom slider or anything else, right? That's kind of why we're doing FlutterFlow, because we want to build unique and beautiful and professional apps. Anytime you're going to be building a custom widget, you're going to be facing a couple of problems. And so if you haven't yet dealt with these problems, rest assured you're going to be dealing with them in the future. And that is because when you are creating a custom widget, this is our custom widget right here, and think of it as a custom slider that we just created. You can pass to it arguments, but the custom widget cannot really pass data back. That is kind of the architecture. And it can't really notify the mother app, the original app, if you will, of any kind of events. It's not possible. There's no kind of, there's really no facility for it to do it. So let me show you what I mean. So if I go back to this widget, I can click on it and I have various parameters. So for now, I can pass to it from the FlutterFlow app, from the mother app, if you will. I can pass to it the width and height. But I can pass more parameters, right? So I can go back to custom widgets. I can come in here and I can create more parameters. Let's say I want to pass the default value. Okay, right now it's 30. Let's say I want to pass a value that I can pass as an argument. So I'm just going to say default value. And this is, what is this? A double. It expects a double. So we're going to say double. And so now we have a default value. You always want to click on this button just to see how it expects it. So I'm going to say view boilerplate, and right here I see this is default value and this is default value. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to come right here. I'm going to paste it here and I'm going to write it here. And I edit this widget and I change this 30 to say, well, widget default value. Okay. And so if I come here and I say, well, weight is going to come from our widget default value, right? Because we have a parameter here, default value. And then I compile and preview it. I will be able to actually specify a new default value. And I can do that for pretty much all the parameters in any of the custom widgets that I build. And that is very, very powerful. All right, so here's our new custom widget. So right now we have a default value of 0, okay? And that is why it's showing 0. But let's say I put 100, now it's 100. So if I drag it down, it works around that value. It goes to 99 and it goes above 100. So if I save it, go back to my app, it's automatically updated and I have a new value, okay? So let's say I put 50, now it's showing 50. I can come back and I can refresh my test environment. All right, so here we see 50 now. What this means is that passing arguments to a widget is very straightforward. It's very, very simple. There's a facility for it. It's very easy to do. And that way you can customize your widget. But we're still facing the original problem. We have no way of notifying our app that we moved this slider. We have no way of changing the values, right? Like, yes, it's changing these values, but nothing else in my app is going to work, because that way I need to include all of these FlutterFlow widgets inside a custom widget. And that kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? Typically, what I want is I want this widget to feed me back information that the user has interacted with the widget. And it's kind of doing it right now, but I don't want it to feed itself. I want it to feed the FlutterFlow app. That is kind of what I want. In other words, I want to remove this and I want to work off this. So I want to drag it up and I want this to change. And once this changes, then I can start this button and it's going to look at the time and it's going to run a countdown from the values here. That is kind of what you want. In other words, what I really want is not only the ability to pass values to the custom widget here. I want to be able to pass values back to our app, and I also wanted to notify back, okay? And if you can do that, you will be able to create amazing apps. You will be able to actually create apps that are interactive, that are great, that are amazing. But unfortunately, for a lot of use cases, it's not very straightforward way of doing this kind of behavior with FlutterFlow. Well, at least until now. So let me show you how to solve this very, very annoying problem. And that way you can build truly amazing apps that delight your users and not be held up by these various roadblocks here. Now, the first thing you have to understand is that you can communicate with different things, different values, things like that, that are located inside your FlutterFlow app from your custom widget, but you have to use a local store. And so just to simplify things, let's say I replace this timer with just text, okay? So I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna put text, and we are gonna increase to 30, okay? Something like this. Now, what we want to do is we want to tie this text to local store, okay? We're going to come here and we're going to add a state variable. And I'm just going to call it variable1. And this variable is going to be a double because our slider, our custom slider, is dealing with a double value. So we're going to say double, it's called var1. And we're going to give it a default value of, let's say, 25, okay? And now we're going to go back to the app. And the first thing you want to do is you want to go to the widget that you want to be modifying the value, reading the value, writing the value. You want to make sure it's getting data from a local store. So if we go to set from variable, we're going to say local state. We're going to say var1. Now it's tied to our local state. The next thing you want to do is you want to go to your widget and you want to go where it says unchanged, right? This is the part that's feeding the data back to the app. In this case, it's feeding data back to the custom widget. But like I said, we want this data to be fed back to the app. And so what you want to do is you want to do something like this. You want to use something called an FFF state, and then you want to use the name of the variable that you have. So FFF state gives you access to your local store. And this is the missing link that allows a custom widget to talk to your app as a whole, right? So we have FFF state var1, and we have the value, and this is a double, so we don't need to convert it. We're just going to have value, okay? And so now, anytime you're changing it, not only is it going to be changing the value inside the custom widget, but it's also going to be changing the value that's outside the custom widget. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hit save, compile and preview. We're going to check if it works. It's still working. We're going to go back to our app and we're going to start a test environment or go to an existing test environment. We're going to hit reload. So now when we are changing, what it's doing as well is it's also changing the local store value. So it's changing the internal value inside the custom widget as before, but it's also changing the value here, okay? Now, there's a problem. You do not see a new value here. You should be seeing a new value. Why not? Well, the answer to that is that we haven't refreshed the page. This thing is refreshing automatically because it's part of a custom widget, but when you are dealing with FlutterFlow, it's not going to refresh automatically. It's changing the value, but it's still displaying the old value. Because the way FlutterFlow is built is that it's not aware that this value was changed, so it needs to repaint it or reload this value. And so, yes, the value is changing both inside the custom widget, as you see here, but it's also changing inside the app. It's just you don't see that yet. What you need to do is you need to send a notification. You need to tell the main app, look, we changed the value, reload the page. This is what you need to do. So that's what we're going to do right now. So we're going to go back to the app. And what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to go back to our custom widget and we are going to introduce a new parameter. We're going to say add parameter. We're going to call it action1. We're going to scroll down. We're going to use an action parameter. And this allows us to notify something when some event happens. Okay, so once you add this parameter, you want to click on this button, view boilerplate code, and you want to see how FlutterFlow generates code for it. So this is this new parameter right here. It does this here, and it adds this line here. So I'm going to copy this line because it's a little bit longer. I'm not going to remember it easily. While I do remember this line, I'm going to go to cancel. I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to add this value here. Okay, and this is also required. All right, so now we have another parameter called action1. And what this called is a callback, okay? We have an action that we can execute, but that action isn't defined yet. So yes, we can execute it. We can notify something of something that something has happened, but this action is not defined yet. So we need to define it right now. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to come back. I'm going to select our slider. And now I see something new. I see an action1, and I can create the actual action, meaning that I can actually tell it what to do when something happens inside the custom widget. We're going to open, and now we have a callback here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an action. And what this action is going to do is going to refresh the screen. We need to refresh the screen because we want to show that new local state value. Okay, so we're going to do navigate to page 2 here. And we're going to do instant. And this is a technique I use all the time, basically to refresh the page without making it seem like the page has refreshed. It looks instant. It's automatic. But that way we can show all the new variables and all the new values. So I'm going to hit close. And now we have an action. So if I open this, we have a navigation, but we still need to execute that action. So we're going to go back to our custom functions. We're going to edit that custom widget. We're going to scroll down and we need to execute it here. So this part right here gets executed every time we move the slider. So what we want to do is every time the slider is changed, the value is changed, we want to update the local store and we want to update the page. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say widget action1. That's what I want to do. I want it to execute. Okay, so now we want to compile and preview. We're going to compile. All right, so here's our custom widget. Let's make sure it still works. Okay, it works in isolation. We're going to hit save. We're going to go back to our app here. It's still there. A new test environment here because that old one has expired. All right, so here's our app. As you can see, it's synced up. Okay, we have 25 here, 25 here. Now, if I try to change the slider, something interesting happens. Take a look at this. As I'm dragging, this value is changing, and that is because it's continuously refreshing the page, but I can't really drag the slider that far. And that is because what's happening is that it's refreshing the page too fast. This slider is like an animation. It takes time. It's very smooth. It's changing it, but it's refreshing the page before I have a chance to drag that slider to the location that I want to drag. So as I'm dragging it down, I can only drag it just a little bit before it refreshes the page and interrupts my slider. So if I drag it down, you see it's changing it. I'm almost getting to 23, but I can't. It interrupts. If I drag it up, I can barely get to 26. And that is because it's continuously refreshing the page before the slider can finish its animation, if that makes sense. So if I'm dragging it up, it's barely getting to 26, whereas I would probably reach 30 by now. And same thing, if I drag it down, it's going to 23, but it's not even going, below 23 or like 22 or anything like that. And so it's almost working. We are changing the FlutterFlow text field that's not part of a custom widget. It's a big progress. We've achieved a lot, but we still need something else to make it work smoother. Because as you can see, that slider wants to go, but it just refreshes the page, not allowing that slider to work. And so we need to do something else. Let me show you what we need to do. And so what we need right here is we need to have a small timer that runs every time we start changing things. And then that timer waits X amount of seconds when we are done with the slider. And so as we're dragging it here, once we stop, this can execute. And so this does not need to be a long timer. It could be as little as 1 second, meaning that once we drag, it's not refreshing the page, it's not doing anything. But once we are done, it waits for 1 second and then refreshes the page. And that's what we need to make this whole thing to come together. And so that's what we're going to be doing right now. And right here, I have a very, very simple timer that starts a countdown every time we start dragging. So for instance, if I come here, remember, we are changing the value here. We're changing, but we're also starting a timer. And what it's doing is it's starting a very small 1 second timer that waits 1 second in this case until we've stopped dragging the slider before it refreshes the page. And if we happen to drag that slider again before that timer has expired, it basically resets itself and waits for 1 second. And so if we are moving that slider around and 1 second has not passed and we start moving the slider again, it basically resets itself and starts counting from 1 again. And so here we have the code, and let me show you the finished product. And so here's the finished product. We have 30 minutes. Now take a look at this. I drag down, it waits for 1 second and it updates it. This is updated automatically because it's part of the same custom widget, but if I drag it above, it updates it. Look at that. I drag down, it updates it. I drag again, it updates it. Drag again, it updates it. So in theory, you can make it even maybe less than a second, maybe half a second or 200 milliseconds or something like that. It's not important. The point is, now it's working how we want it to work. So take a look at this. I drag it, 22, 16, at 16, and I can even start this. And look at that. It starts a countdown. Let's say I want a different time. Let's say I want 29. And now I can have a countdown from 29. Let's say I stop this and I go to, let's say I want like a 15-minute task. 15 minutes. Let's get that. Yeah, 15 minutes. And now it's going to have a 15-minute task. And so what we've just accomplished is something that's very, very easy to do in Flutter, but very, very complicated to do in FlutterFlow. What we have now is we have the ability to pass arguments to custom widget, but we also have a way for this custom widget to talk back to the mother app, to the hosting app, and also notify it when something happens so that it can refresh the page. And this is extremely, extremely powerful because now you can go out, you can load up any kind of custom widget to do pretty much any kind of UI work, right? You can head to fluttergems.dev and we have a sliders. You can use all of these sliders, and not only can you have beautiful animation from the custom widget, but you can also have that custom widget talk back to your app and notify it of things that it deems important. Also change the data, work with local store, change the local store, change the stuff that's being displayed on the app, and tell it, look, I've just changed something. It's time to refresh the app. As we have right here, check out how awesome that is. I can go back to 5. It's now 5. And now it has a countdown from 5. As an additional bonus, I went ahead and created various parameters that you can configure this slider with. So we have the minimum value, we have the interval, we have the max value, and we have that action here. And so now you have a slider that's completely configurable. So if you want like a max value of 100, you want a minimum value of 1, you want an interval of 1, you can do it. And the default value is actually set directly from the local state. So if I go to local state, I have a field called task time. And let's say I want it to be default 45. Maybe I want the default Pomodoro task to be 45 minutes. I can set 45 here. I can go back to the app. And now when we run it, it's going to be a 45-minute default with a minimum value of 1. Maybe for the maximum value, we want 60 and an interval of 1 minute. So now if we come in here and we reload the app, we're going to have 45 minutes. We're going to have the maximum 60 minutes and the minimum 1 minute. Okay, so now you can put just about any time you want. Let's say you want 33, refreshes automatically, and we can start a task from that time. You can pause it. You can resume it if you want. You can change the time. Let's say I want a 25. I can start this task. I can start this task here. I can pause it, etc., etc. And so now you have a fully customizable, beautiful slider that's very, very unique. That's not like a built-in slider. It's very interesting, very unique. Plus, you have various parameters in addition to width and height. You have minimum value, you have an interval, you have a maximum value. And then you have that whole notification facility where it talks back and updates the timer. It updates, the time it needs to refresh the page and does a lot of cool things. And so, as you know, you will be able to view and clone this app as well as all my FlutterFlow apps on my Patreon page. So if you're not subscribed yet, you should definitely do so. I'm also going to be doing a new behind the scenes series that's going to be exclusive for our Patreon subscribers. We have an awesome community there. And so you should definitely join if you are interested in taking your no-code knowledge up a level or 2. And so I sincerely hope you've gotten a lot of value from this technique, because this allows you to more tightly integrate different custom widgets to your main FlutterFlow app. That way they can not only get arguments and get parameters, but they can also modify data inside your main app and also notify the app when something needs to be done. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below this video. Check out our Patreon page, and don't forget to subscribe if you're interested in FlutterFlow as well as general no-code topics. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll talk to you real soon.